Oh, hey guys, welcome back to Reserved Investments. I haven't slept in 24 hours. My hair looks it, and I can tell you, my breath smells it. But I did bring props. I brought PEZ dispensers for us to interact with. Well, me to interact with, because let's be honest, you're watching this on a two-dimensional screen. Let me straighten out the camera there. And you're not going to be able to, unfortunately, touch and interact with and molest the wonderful PEZ dispensers. So these props are just for me. But today, we are going to be talking about PEZ. Now, why did I wait till now to do this particular video? Well, for those of you that get Netflix, there is an excellent documentary called the PEZ Outlaw that you all should watch, even if you have no interest in PEZ. I want to be 100% transparent with that. You do not have to like PEZ to watch this documentary. Full disclosure, I don't really consider myself a PEZ head, okay? I made a lot of money back in the 1990s selling these particular dispensers into the secondary market because there was a massive speculative bubble that occurred with PEZ collecting back then. And we're going to talk about that today. Now, I am going to be talking about this particular documentary called the PEZ Outlaw in depth in this particular video. If you don't want me to spoil it for you, this may not be a good video for you to watch. So if you do want to watch that particular documentary before watching this video, you can. I'm okay with that. Just understand that I am going to be going in depth here on what happened in that documentary, how it turned out, and why it happened the way it did. And for those unaware, back in the 1980s, 1990s, PEZ was an extremely popular collectible. Today, PEZ is pretty much in a death spiral. Not the company itself. The company itself is still profitable. They still make dispensers to this day. They sell out. They do very well financially. But the collecting side of PEZ is pretty much on a downward spiral. Reason being is a lot of the people that were drawn to collecting PEZ dispensers are now getting up there in age. PEZ really had its heyday in the 1990s, and it started its upward climb in the 1980s with the advent of certain auction houses. Mainly it was Christie's, possibly Sotheby's, if I remember correctly, that pretty much had some key profile PEZ auctions that soared to new heights. And back then, this was before the internet, guys. This kind of ushered in a whole new era, a whole speculative bubble where collectors wanted rare and scarce dispensers. Now, this is where we have to have an in-depth conversation before we even talk about the documentary, the PEZ Outlaw. For those unaware, how PEZ operates is PEZ is an international company. Now, I'm in the United States, they're overseas. What PEZ does is they pretty much cater to the European market because that's where they're located. And they have a subsidiary, PEZ USA, located in the US. PEZ USA can look at a lot of the dispensers they're putting out in Europe and they can say, you know what, we're going to pass on those dispensers. Or, you know what, we really like this one. We think that this will sell well in America. We're going to also market this particular dispenser in the US. Well, back in the 1980s, back in the early 1990s, before the internet, what was happening was PEZ collectors clamored to get the scarce dispensers, or perceived to be scarce dispensers, that were only sold overseas in the international European market. So there is one individual, very eccentric guy, who really figured this out, and his name is Steve Glue, and he is the star of the documentary, The PEZ Outlaw. Well, in the 1990s, he had an excellent idea. He said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go over to Europe. I'm going to go to the PEZ factory, and I'm going to try to buy as many of these dispensers that are only available in the European market, international market. I'm going to bring them back to the U.S., gray market arbitrage here, guys, and I'm going to sell them for a markup to a lot of these collectors. Now, in the 80s and 90s, with the PEZ speculative bubble in full swing, and no internet, so people couldn't just log on and buy this stuff from overseas directly or from a wholesaler or somebody else. This was a brilliant idea. And he ended up profiting to the tune of literally hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, this is where I'm going to spoil this particular documentary for you. What I want you to get out of this is at the end of the documentary, he pretty much goes bankrupt. He loses it all. And this is what a lot of people that set out to invest, collect, speculate, build a collectible portfolio in the antiques and collectibles trade. This is something that they do not understand. That's why I preach a lot of the core principles that I was taught and a lot of the core principles that I adhere to on this particular YouTube channel. Because you can't put all your money in antiques and collectibles. And if you watch this particular documentary, you're going to walk away with that same analysis. Now, the mistake that Steve Glue made was he got a little too greedy. He pretty much tried to take on PEZ head on, and they pretty much came into the market and they crushed him. And I hate to say this, anybody with business sense would have expected them to do just that because they had the money, they had the ability to just come in and crush him. I'm not going to ruin the full documentary for you because I think you should watch it, but just know it doesn't really have a happy ending in that regard. Whereas I think, honestly, if he would have just came into the money, and I'm sorry, if he would have just came into the market, Freudian slip there, I said money. If he would have just came into the market, made his money, and literally invested it and walked away at that particular point and said, you know what? I have enough. I made like $250,000. I made $500,000. Sitting in index-based mutual funds over the next 20 years, it's going to turn into millions. I'm good with that. He would have been fine. But unfortunately, greed, passion, emotional attachment got in the way. And he decided to get head on in this market. And PEZ came in. They looked at what he was doing. And they pretty much undercut him. And they crushed him. And that's an honest account of what happens in a lot of these markets. You know, we've seen this all before, guys. If you look at the junk wax era of sports cards, if you look at the modern era speculative bubble of comic books, if you look at even Beanie Babies, Pogs, if you look at some of these other collecting categories, even right now, look what's happening with graded video games. Graded video games, they freaking became a thing. The market was allegedly manipulated. They shot up in value. What happened? A lot of the smart people got out. They pretty much sold off their holdings. And now the market's declining. The market's down 50, 60, 70%. And yeah, video games aren't going to go to zero. But I know one thing. I wouldn't be too happy if I paid $100,000 for a video game and it just sold on an auction site, similar game, similar grade, for 85% less. I mean, you got to really be upset if that happens. You have to understand the risks of operating in unregulated markets, which is what the antiques and collectibles trade is. So that's really why I want you guys to watch this particular documentary. Now, full disclosure, back in the day, I made a lot of money on PEZ. Not going to lie. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I was very honest, though. Somebody came to me back in the day and they wanted to buy a PEZ dispenser off me or a vintage video game, which would have been like from the Atari, ColecoVision, and television eras. Because remember, guys, back when eBay came out, eBay pretty much premiered in 1995 under the name of Auction Web. And when eBay first came out, it ushered in a mass speculative market for a lot of these collectibles. Not just PEZ, it was pre-Nintendo video games, it was modern era action figures and toys, it was Beanie Babies, it was Pogs. I mean, the market was going haywire to the point where if you really knew what you were doing, you would literally make hundreds, if not thousands per week. And if you were smart, you would be putting that money into cash-paying assets, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, real estate, ETFs, the like. Now, I don't think ETFs existed. Exchange-traded funds really didn't exist back around 1995. That really became a thing in the early 2000s. But there were index-based mutual funds. The first index-based mutual fund premiered in the 1970s, courtesy of the Vanguard Group. So I'm just stating that if you knew what you were doing, you knew how to invest, you knew how to make money, the 1990s, when eBay and the internet first premiered, it was a cash printing machine. And few people understand this. And if we look at how we got here in the year 2023, it's because a lot of these companies saw it. And a lot of these billion-dollar corporations, investors, Wall Street, everybody got involved and pretty much propped this thing up. And now antiques and collectibles are the newest asset class. Antiques and collectibles are worth investing in. Antiques and collectibles can't go wrong. Well, you can go wrong because these markets are unregulated. These are niche markets. Now, I'm going to state this in this video, and I know this is going to be controversial for some of you. You know, when I first started this YouTube channel, I would get into a lot of healthy debates with a lot of Pokemon collectors, Pokemon enthusiasts, video game collectors, the Magic the Gathering crowd. All these individuals that are really into a lot of these modern era collecting categories. And I would sometimes, I hate to say this, I would bait them a little bit. I would start talking about Beanie Babies. I would start talking about Pogs. And I knew where they were going to take the conversation. They were going to go, Sean, you can't compare Pokemon to Beanie Babies or Pogs. And then I would smile and I would look at them and I would go, well, we can compare them to PEZ. PEZ is still around in the year 2022, 2023, whatever. And PEZ is still making money. There's still a lot of people that go to the supermarket and they buy a PEZ dispenser. But guess what? The collectability of PEZ is pretty much in the toilet. And this is one of those collecting categories, much like Schwinn bicycles, much like Lionel toy trains, where in certain instances, the parent company may have gone bankrupt, or the parent company may still exist, and they still may have a large following. But overall, the collecting community that once clamored for these particular items has pretty much already left the market, because either they were older generations or just younger generations are not collecting a lot of this stuff anymore. And that's really what the case is with PEZ. I mean, I've already seen this. If you go to Walmart, you go to Target, you go to any of the grocery store that sells PEZ, the kid in the checkout aisle will go, oh, mommy, buy me that. I want a PEZ dispenser. And it's quite funny because he'll open it up and he doesn't even like the taste of the candy. He doesn't want the candy. He just wants the dispenser. And it's kind of interesting how the PEZ market works, because I don't know anybody that likes eating PEZ candy. Sorry to say if you're somebody from PEZ watching this video, but I know very few people that like the taste of the candy. You know, most people don't know this. PEZ was actually started as a way to get people to quit smoking. The actual first candies that were created were actually, I think it was spearmint or peppermint flavored. It was actually a mint that you would dissolve in your mouth instead of reaching for a cigarette. And that's how PEZ was born. It was not meant to be child's candy. It actually changed very quickly early on when they saw there was a market to do something like that with a unique dispenser that a child would want to own and possibly collect. That's how PEZ was pretty much formed. So I just want to state that you need to understand how these markets work. And if you study the market for PEZ, you're going to see that the PEZ market substantially changed over the last 20 years. And if you were attempting to invest in it, if you were attempting to speculate in this market, you really had to be abreast of the market so that you could push the exit button when needed, so you don't end up losing a lot of money. There's a lot of great videos out there. You know, I came across a video the other day, and I've watched it before, but I forgot about it. There is a video on YouTube, and I think it's titled, I would love to get the name of it so I could put it in the video description. I didn't do my research ahead of time. I've been up 24 hours. But it's called something like Bankrupt on Beanies. And somebody spent like $100,000 on Beanie Babies, and the market bubble burst. And he was left with all of these Beanie Babies that he can't sell. And now they're pretty much worthless. And it's a very interesting video that pretty much takes you inside his house. And you see Rubbermaid containers just full of Beanie Babies that he can no longer sell, that just a few years earlier, those things would have been selling for like 30, 40, 50 bucks a piece minimum. It's insane how these markets work, okay? If you're operating in the antiques and collectibles trade, please understand that you need to learn about speculative bubbles. You need to understand truly what takes place behind the scenes in a lot of these markets. And one good step to do that is to watch documentaries like this. So I highly recommend the PEZ Outlaw. I hope that you guys enjoy it. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. It is well worth watching. If you want to see me do an updated video on PEZ, I gladly will. I will say one thing though, I am probably going to get some sleep first. Thanks for watching and have a great night, day. I don't even know what time it is.